Thanks for joining me today on Tide 10, and I really appreciate you supporting Tide and its community.
No problem, Steve. It's great to be with you. You guys are doing great work, so thank you so much for having me.
We'll go started with the questions here.
Great.
Obviously, we're still dealing with the pandemic, with some states experiencing resurgence. It doesn't look like it'll go away anytime soon. What adjustments have you and your team had to make, to adapt to this new normal? Has the office reopened? If so, any plans to reopen?
And unfortunately, it's looking like the signs are pointing to sliding back a little bit as the cities and states are beginning to reopen. So, but one of the benefits of being in the business as long as I have is, we were able to have a pretty good business continuity plan in place when it was time to move to remote work back in March. Obviously with the sensitivity surrounding our workflow with trading, wires, banking, we needed to be really prepared and make sure that we had secure access to our servers. We were maintaining best practices, following operational protocol and watching for things like fraud. I have to say, it was shockingly seamless. My team, really made this difficult situation, look relatively easy. If I'm being honest, Steve, I think they've been more productive in this teleworking environment. But we are starting to come back, and I really think that's been harder than it was to get them to leave. Talking to my colleagues across the street, it appears as though most people are going to be teleworking for the remainder of the year. But for us, we work for the taxpayers, right? So we were following the guidelines laid out by the mayor and the governor. We're currently at 40% capacity, working alternating shifts. We've modified our office space to make sure that we're properly distanced and the environment's safe for our staff. But we're continuing to monitor things, but it's really hard to imagine we're going to be at full capacity and back to the full functionality anytime soon.
We're operating with the same sentiments. Us as a pseudo-governmental entity, we're also following the states and cities guidelines. But Illinois has done relatively well, so I'm thankful for that.
Yeah.
So, let's get into the next one. So I believe you came from a private market, if I'm not mistaken, RBC Capital Markets, right?
Yeah, I did. I was at 11 years at RBC, and then prior to that, 17 years at Bear Stearns. Steve, it doesn't get much further apart on the spectrum than private sector sell side and public sector buy side.
Right.
You can imagine, it was quite a transition. I was very fortunate, though. I inherited an amazing team that helped me come up the curve pretty quickly. No one would ever confuse a Wall Street trading firm for a Boy Scout jamboree, Steve. So I would say, one of the first adjustments that I had to make was learning how to express myself in maybe what we'd say is a less colorful way.
Yeah.
I needed to learn to be much more succinct and precise in my communication. I'd say probably the biggest adjustment, for me was, managing the information flow. Literally every dollar that comes into and out of the city, comes through my office. All of those flows have an associated email chain, right? So I get hundreds of emails a day that need to be answered quickly. There's always an approval, a signature. That doesn't even address my trading activity, right? When I started, we had 57 broker dealers, 17 municipal depositories between sales, trading, research, relationship managers, vendors. I get thousands of Bloomberg messages, IBs, texts, calls, chats. It's really incredible. And then there's my calendar, Steve. I'm sure you have the same problem. I never had to manage a calendar before. Literally anyone in the city can come in and grab time on my calendar. So, my days rarely go the way that I intend when they started, but it's been good. My goal was really to bring, my private sector background to the public sector, and really change the perception of the CTO and the capabilities of the city as an asset manager. And so far, Steve, the feedback has been really positive.
No, that's good. That's really good. Yeah, I echo your, challenges coming from a private side. I also experienced the same challenges coming over to the public sector as well.
Right.
So you're a CIO, Chief Investment Officer for Treasurer's Office. So can you tell our audience about, what your role is at the CTO, as well as what CTO does for the city of Chicago?
Yeah, sure, Steve. I'm happy to do so. Thanks for asking the question, because it's I guess it's surprising to me, as we've gone around the city, we've had, done town halls and symposiums. It's really surprising to me that very few people know, what the CTO does, or that we even have an investment portfolio. Everybody's, hey, what's that mayor like to work for? I don't work for the mayor. So, as chief investment officer, I really see, the role as being the ultimate custodian for the city's $9+ billion investment portfolio, Steve. I view the primary responsibility of mine to be as a fiduciary of taxpayer dollars. I really have three mandates, Steve. One is to preserve capital. The second is to manage the city's liquidity needs. And the third is to maximize risk-adjusted return using allowable investments. As you know, I manage the investment portfolio as a passive manager, or what we call buy and hold in the business. Unlike the work that you're doing with MEABF and the city pension funds, I'm looking to create a well-diversified, high-quality, liquid fixed income portfolio that's capable of withstanding a wide range of economic cycles. Obviously, fundamental analysis and asset selection is critical to what we do. But I set asset allocation, concentration limits. I manage duration. But as you know, and you have the same problem, we're a very lean team. So, we wear a lot of hats. I also manage risk. I manage compliance. I even head up operations. So I would say as a municipality and kind of looking at my peers across the country, we have a very dynamic investment policy, and it's resulted in a very interesting investment portfolio that really helps to take some of the burden off the backs of taxpayers.
And your fiduciary responsibility spans to us as a
it sure does.
Proxy trustee as well, right?
Right. Yeah, we sit as trustee on all four of the city's pension funds as well. Steve, as you know, I'm a sworn-in trustee on MEAB, and so we do advise the treasurer in her role on all four of the city's pension funds, and that's very, very important to her.
Yeah, that's a really important responsibility.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's talk about the portfolio a little bit. What are you guys focused on during this pandemic as well as a market cycle? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and you're right. I've been in the business long enough to have seen, both the financial crisis and September 11th. And I'm sure, like you, this is like nothing any one of us has ever seen, right? So, March and April, it certainly felt like the world was coming to an end, and I'm not sure which is more breathtaking, the sell-off or the subsequent recovery. I'm just glad that the worst of it seems to be in our rearview mirror. I was fortunate when things sort of, got ugly and credit spreads, gapped out. I had sort of an outsized cash position, so I was able to step in and provide liquidity and take advantage of some of the severe dislocation in the market. Once we started to see the stimulus coming into the market, it was basically QE infinity. I really saw it as warm water to kind of jump in. To answer your question, when the pandemic, really took hold, we realized this was not just the flu, right? As a city office, I had to really pivot towards capital preservation and liquidity, right? My main tenets of responsibility as a fiduciary. For the most part, we were okay with credit migration, right? There are a few things that I didn't like, as we kind of, look to enter what we think is a new economy. So, I'm proactively able to move out of a few names and sectors. And so going forward, I feel like we're really well positioned for, what's to come. So my real focus now, Steve, is on liquidity. Mm-hmm. It'd be ridiculous to think that you could close, a city and state's economy for an extended period of time and not see a negative impact on revenues and expenses. And that's really what drives what I do. But they're difficult to project, right? So without granularity, I've had to really bulk up my cash position. I've had to also look to build a short-term liquidity ladder that sort of helps me, should things get worse, grow organically, my cash position, substantially quickly, right? I've been, spending a lot of time, running some fairly draconian numbers on revenues and expenses. And I'm happy to say that given, what I know, we're in pretty good shape. I've seen actual numbers for April, May, and June. I'll get July here in just a couple of days. But so far, those numbers have been, much better than I would have expected, when we first entered this situation. But I know there's a lag, right? And so, I've got to be braced for what's coming in August and probably even September, maybe even the rest of the year, right? Right. We kind of talk about in the business, cash is king, right? But Steve, it's never been more expensive to hold cash, right? You're probably well aware that your compensating balances and and your money market funds are next to zero, right? So the real key to us is going to be to be able to read the tea leaves to know when things are improving, from the economy and the city and our revenue and cash position, so that we can really move to and shift back to a more normalized strategy.
Yeah, no, I appreciate all the work that you guys do there. It's never easy,
Yeah, and property taxes are coming in well for you, Steve. I know that. So that's good news.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
As a fiduciary for the pension plan, I like to hear that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So another important part of CTO to you as well as treasurer is D&I, diversity and inclusion.
Right.
With everything that's going on in the country, what role do you think investment community should and could play addressing D&I and equality as well?
Yeah, great question. I know you and I, could talk about this for hours. And Steve, I know you know how important that is to the treasurer, and trust me, it's not lost on her how important it is to you and the work you're doing, MEABF. She's, incredibly pleased with what you're doing there as a fund. But Steve, you're right. I mean, this is just a truly unique time in our country's history, and while there seems to be, so much anger and mistrust, I really believe that we're going to look back on this time in history as an amazing time of change. And I think the financial services community, to your question, will play an enormous part in that change. We have to, Steve, right? We have the money, and where there's money, there's power. I look back at when I started in this business and where we've come from that time, and it feels to me like we've come such a long way. But like you, I'm in the trenches and I'm rolling up my sleeves to try to see what we can do better, and you realize, that there's so much more we can do, right? I really wish we had more time to talk about, all the social impacts initiatives that my office has underway, but we don't, obviously, in this forum. But I think DE&I is a great place to start, right? And from my perspective, it's all about being intentional and deliberate within your platform, and then really looking for ways to sort of push outward, right? Mm-hmm. Like you and the work you're doing at MEAB, when possible, we're looking to direct our trading volume through MBE, WBE, and DVBE firms. When I came in a year ago, we were doing about 46% of our trading volume with those types of firms, and right now I'm happy to say that we're tracking 2020 to come in closer to 55%, right? As I think of ways to push that outward, I know that volume is a bad barometer, Steve. I think you do that with your pension funds. You talk about fees on the equity side, but volume, on the fixed income side. And I know a CP trade is not the same as a structured product trade or a 30-year fixed income, IG corporate trade. So what I'm looking to do is create a weighting system that helps me sort of gauge the true value of a trade. We're looking at each trade that we're doing to more accurately measure the impact that we're making. Beyond that, how are we engaging our MBE, WBE, and DVBE partners to ensure that they know what we're doing so that they can be better and more effective counterparties, right? Mm-hmm. But one of the things that I think you and I have talked about, at length is, how do we get through the ownership structure? How do we look through, that, sort of hurdle to see what firms are really doing with D&I and corporate social responsibility? As part of, part of what we do all of our trading through an approved broker-dealer list that are selected through a broker-dealer RFI questionnaire. Last year, I was able to announce the first of its kind broker diversity scorecard. For the first time, we were beginning to ask questions about the true metrics surrounding D&I and introducing E in corporate social responsibility. And that scorecard became 25% of the weighting on how we selected our BDs. We went from 57 counterparties to just 33, but we felt those 33 firms were more closely aligned with the citizens of Chicago. Now, it's a great first step, Steve, but that's really all it is, right? It's a first step. The real question is, how can we make those questions better in follow up? It's easy to just create a scorecard, pick firms, and go home, right? The real work comes with sitting down with each one of those firms and talking to them about why they fell short, what they need to do to get better, and then sitting down with the firms that made it and where they're doing well and where they could do better. I had an interesting conversation with David Casper, who's CEO of BMO Harris. He was a keynote speaker at one of our town halls, and I was getting ready to talk about some of the metrics that that we selected the broker-dealers by and some of the results of the scorecard. And he pulled me aside with his administrative assistant and said, I want you to talk to him, spend time with him. I don't know how we scored, but we can do better. And I think that was the heartwarming sort of top-down sort of thought process that I think will really help impact change. Mm-hmm. One of the unintended consequences of our scorecard, we got a fair amount of national press with it. And I got 7 calls from 7 cities from around the country that were interested in implementing the scorecard. So while you kind of think as a city, I've got $9 billion, it doesn't feel like a very big lever. I think there is true power in partnership. And that's really where I think we're going to drive real fundamental change going forward, Steve.
From CTO's perspective, the office has a chief impact officer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Responsibilities. I think this is the first time I actually heard of a chief impact officer. I think the word I want to say is intentionality.
Yeah.
I think that has having the intention to make changes. I think CTO certainly bears that.
Yeah, I think that's the key to it, because if you're not intentional, your 55% become 43% real quickly. And so with Ashley and her role as Chief Impact Officer, we've been able to work across our platform as an office to create a number of initiatives that are going to have a positive impact in the city of Chicago and the residents.
I really thank you for your time, but I want to end the interview with 2 quick.
It's been my pleasure, Steve. Thank you.
All right. So, what's the one thing you miss most in during quarantine?
I'd say that's an easy one, Steve. Family. I'm older, and I know you've got younger children. Being in the city and doing the socially distanced walk, you see these young families together and really enjoying what's important in life. My kids are older and spread out. My mother is older and struggling with some memory issues, and so it's been a difficult time, to be alone. And I think for people who are alone, I think be mindful of that and be cognizant of it. Reach out to those people who are. But I would say family is first and foremost.
Cubs or Sox?
Oh man, that's an easy one, man. Cubs all the way.
Northsider.
I am a Northsider, but I grew up in Rockford. My dad used to bring me in for games when I was a kid, and then used to come in with my brother, and now I'm a Northsider now. But yeah, what I tell you, it was great to see the World Series, but more than anything, it's good to see baseball back and sports in general. And I think the Sox will be doing well, but this is going to be a strange world. I don't know how football is going to do it, but it's good to have sports back, so we've got something to root for in the city.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so deep dish or thin crust?
Oh, I'm probably going to lose my Chicago card, right? But I'm going to go thin crust, right? New York, I kind of like when you have to fold it and, let the, I love that Neapolitan style with the coal-fired ovens and that, thin crust. But yeah, if you're gonna do thick, you got to go Pequods. But I'm going to say thin crust all the way, man. Yeah, but I will say you got to do mustard on hot dogs. No ketchup. I'll redeem myself on the Chicago side.
Yeah, I'm with you. So last question, best piece of advice you've ever received?
Oh, there's a lot of it, but you're kind of in the theme of, if don't say it if you want it to be on the cover of the Wall Street Journal. I'd say, if you'd be ashamed to talk to your mom about it, it's probably the wrong thing to do.
That's a good advice for everyone. So I really appreciate your time here and supporting Tide as well. So.
Yeah, you've been a great partner. I've known Grace through her work at AIM. We've been looking at ways to collaborate, so this has been great. So thank you for having me. You guys are doing great work.
All right, thank you so much. We'll chat soon.
Take care, Steve.